pretty boring sprint qualifying, but boy were we rewarded with a fantastic race on Sunday. It had a McLaren 1-2 with a Daniel Ricciardo victory, coupled with a hugely significant incident between the two title contenders, which left them both beached in the gravel. So we've got a lot to talk about. Here's my 5 things we learned from the Italian Grand Prix. Let's have a look. My name's Andy, and this is Behind the Drive. Ricciardo's redemption. This weekend was fantastic for Daniel Ricciardo, and it's obviously a green box for the Australian driver who's well and truly proven why he was the right driver to replace Carlos Sainz in that McLaren seat. He's had a really tough season so far, and after a reset over the summer break he's come back strong in the second half of the season. But this weekend's performance in particular has obviously been his best yet. It started off with a strong qualifying run with 5th on the grid, followed by a great getaway in the sprint which put him 3rd in that event. This put him on the front row of the grid after Valtteri Bottas' grid drop, so that was already an amazing position for him and McLaren to be. But then he got away fantastically to get past the Red Bull of Max Verstappen and took the lead of the Grand Prix, his first laps in the lead since his final race for Red Bull in 2018. This was then backed up with a very good stop from McLaren as they put the pressure on the Red Bull mechanics in what looked like a close battle for the lead of the Grand Prix, but following a mistake from the Red Bull pit crew, Ricciardo looked to be in position A going into the second stint of the race. Once the drama happened between Hamilton and Verstappen, which I will take a look at later on, Ricciardo was leading the pack behind the safety car, with a stint on the medium tyres between him and his 8th Formula 1 race victory. And he did it in style, controlling the race from the front, and even with a rapid Perez and Bottas behind the two McLarens, Ricciardo led the way to take his first victory since leaving the Red Bull setup. He's the second driver to achieve that feat after Sebastian Vettel. The best thing is that I think that this win would have happened regardless of the Verstappen-Hamilton incident, as he was on top from the start and controlling that pace. I really hope this sets him off to achieve more for that McLaren team. He's a class driver as we all know, but it's just taken him some time to get comfortable in that team. But it was worth the wait, as it was Ricciardo who brought home the team's first win since 2012. Lando Norris finally gets a podium that isn't a 3rd place. To top it off for McLaren, Norris made it a 1-2 finish for the team. It was a great outcome and the best result that they've had in well over a decade. For Norris, it's his 5th podium finish in Formula 1, but it's his first that isn't on the 3rd step as he came home 2nd in the race today. And Norris was a class act all weekend. He qualified 4th and then lost out in the sprint after being squeezed to the edge of the track by Lewis Hamilton at the start. And then lining up P3 on Sunday, Norris drove an incredible race, fending off Hamilton throughout the early stages, which allowed his teammate to have some breathing space up ahead as he fended off Max Verstappen at the front. It was a class drive for Norris in what has been an incredible season for the British driver. And today, McLaren were the best team out there, and he was a key part of that. Once the safety car came in, Norris continued to do a fantastic job, clearing the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc and then defending from Perez and Bottas behind him. He was also a class act today and only pushed for the win a little bit, claiming he was faster than Ricciardo, before holding station and agreeing it was the best thing for the team to stay put and bring home the 1-2. It's unbelievable to think that McLaren have had a 1-2 this season and are the only team to have achieved it. What an incredible result. And for the team it was huge as well, as they're well and truly back after the lows that they've had during the turbo hybrid era. It was a great haul of points for the team as they retook 3rd position in the championship over Ferrari, and so I'm happy that they've come back and got to the front. So yes, of course it's a green box for Lando Norris and McLaren. The halo saves the day. Next up, I want to give a green box to the halo. The incident between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton was quite frankly a scary one, as the Red Bull went over the roll hoop of the Mercedes into the first chicane. It was a pretty terrifying crash, with the halo definitely saving Lewis Hamilton from serious injury and potentially even saving his life. As for the incident itself, well, I think this one's just a racing incident. The Mercedes driver should have left more room for Verstappen through the chicane, and Verstappen needed to acknowledge the fact that Hamilton was ahead going into the corner. I think at the speed Max was going, he was never going to be able to make the second part of the chicane given his angle, and he would have ended up drifting out wide, and it was that which made contact inevitable between the two drivers in that moment. So this is where Verstappen is also somewhat at blame for this incident as well. You also have to consider the other incident between the two drivers, where Hamilton was on the outside and got pushed out in a similar way into turn 4 on lap 1. Yes, on this occasion the British driver locked up, so you could blame that, but Max also didn't leave him any room, just as Hamilton didn't into turn 2. It's probably a net gain for Red Bull and Verstappen, as this was definitely a circuit that Mercedes looked particularly strong, and certainly qualified well on Friday. And for Verstappen to be leaving this Grand Prix with his lead in the championship still intact, I'm sure on the whole he'll be very pleased when looking at it from the context of the whole season. But at the same time, it's another incident between the two championship contenders. Both drivers don't exactly help themselves or each other when they come close on track. This is where the championship will be won or lost this season, as they've just damaged each other's chances and kept the gap in the championship to just 5 points. What I know for sure though is that the stewards have a very tough call to make to determine if one driver was more at fault over the other. Overall, the most important thing is the fact that both drivers have walked away okay, and the fact that the Halo has yet again done a very good job of protecting the drivers. I think that introducing that safety device has been one of the best decisions that Formula 1 has ever made. The sprint weekend format still needs some work. Next up, I need to talk about the fact that this weekend saw the second running of the sprint qualifying weekend format. This time around, it was a bit more underwhelming than the last. Qualifying on Friday saw the normal, farcical slow laps with drivers jostling for position on their outlaps, which was always going to cause issues. But it seems like until the stewards clamp down on the minimum outlap time, there will always be a risk for the drivers on the grid, as having that kind of differential on track could lead to a terrifying incident. Once we got into the sprint race on Saturday though, it was all a bit disappointing. Lewis Hamilton had a poor getaway off the line, which saw him drop backwards, but other than that, there were just minor changes to the order from drivers who got a poor start. Yes, that led to a relatively mixed up grid on Sunday, but the whole sprint event felt like it was just about to get to the good bit, with the pit stops, before it came to an abrupt end. So yes, I suppose it left me wanting more, but the ending was a bit flat, without the element of strategy at Monza, where even with the long straights and DRS it's difficult for cars to overtake. And ultimately it was on Sunday that we actually got to see those strategies emerge. Pierre Gasly was also a loser after this, after misjudging the amount of room he needed to give to Ricciardo through the opening chicane of the sprint race. The resulting off left Gasly out of the race and starting Sunday's Grand Prix from the pit lane, and then out of the race altogether after just 5 laps. This was a real shame after he'd done so well to put his AlphaTauri car in a good grid slot for that event, after a 6th place finish in Friday qualifying. It just feels wrong that because of a racing incident, he ends up at the back of the order for the race, and all of his hard work on Friday was for nothing. Yes, of course that's racing, and that's an element of this format. We saw a similar situation with Sergio Perez at Silverstone after all, but it just left me feeling like the Frenchman was a bit hard done by on this occasion. I still believe there's something in this idea. They have replaced a free practice session with a race, so it's certainly an improvement, but I still think they need to reward the drivers with more points and try to remove some of the gimmicks, like making those medals look a bit more sensibly sized, for example. It definitely needs some work, and it's a shame they didn't try anything materially different going into this second trial run. So overall, I think the sprint race needs an amber box for this week, as there's still some work to do there. A fantastic recovery drive for Valtteri Bottas. At the Italian Grand Prix in 2020, Valtteri Bottas struggled massively to carve his way through the field after he got caught in a DRS train. This year, Bottas has been a different man. Since Mercedes have announced that he would be leaving the team, he's just done so well. He put his Mercedes car on pole, maintained that to take 3 points for winning the sprint qualifying event, and then went from the back of the grid to finish 3rd in the race. It's a brilliant performance from the Finn, who ensured Mercedes came out on top in the Constructors' battle, at least this weekend. It was a great drive from the Finnish driver, and it even looked like he could have taken the win at one point as he had blistering pace after the safety car restart. But either way, he thought he could get a podium finish, and that's what he delivered. I'm sure he was behind 2 drivers that he wouldn't have expected, but who cares? It's still a podium from the back of the grid, and a fantastic drive. So it's a green box for Bottas today. Honourable mentions. Honourable mentions now, and I think it's worth giving a shout out to Sergio Perez. Perez has basically gave up on his weekend on Friday evening as he gave Verstappen the tow in qualifying to ensure his teammate could compete at the front. He then had a tough sprint race, and after starting 9th on Sunday he came back well through the race. Even if he had a couple of moves which were a bit doubtful and he did end up with a penalty, I do believe he did a good job this weekend. Charles Leclerc also deserves a shout out, as he did a great job despite his Ferrari car not quite having the pace to stay at the front. So a good drive for the Monegasque driver this weekend. A great race and a fan favourite winner as we saw Ricciardo and McLaren win a race. I'm just so pleased for them all. What did you make of the race, and what did I miss? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching.